Let's move to this story, the £600 million mobility scheme. I mean, we've got an awful lot of question marks around this. And of course, nobody disputes that if you take a mobility car as, I think it comes as kind of an option, as distinct from cash, you can get a mobility allowance. The question is, who gets the cars? Now, we're hearing stories that people with constipation are being... Believe me, the only person you don't want to give a brand new car to is somebody with constipation, I promise you. Tennis elbow is another one. And all other bizarre ailments, netting Brits brand new cars under what is seen as a corrupted scheme. Let's speak with Elliot Keck, Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. To coin the phrase, Elliot, this is bonkers and out of control.
Good afternoon, Ian. It was a once pretty uncontroversial scheme, Motability, basically set up so that people with very severe disabilities, who in particular needed maybe modifications to their car to enable them to drive it, could get access to basically benefit payments and a scheme that they could trade that benefit payments for to allow them to get around. And what it's morphed into is something incredibly disfigured that I think actually does a disservice to people with very serious problems, because now there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people claiming it for things like ADHD, anxiety and depression, alcohol misuse, obesity, and it's these conditions, the conditions that arguably people shouldn't be receiving free cars for, that are seeing the biggest increases. So the very serious conditions that a lot of people are afflicted with that do prevent people from getting around, of which they aren't responsible for, something like cerebral palsy, are seeing much smaller increases.
Yes, and this is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because I was always under the assumption, as I said at the beginning, Elliot, that you kind of took the mobility option as distinct from taking additional money. So you surrendered one to get the other.
Yeah, that's right.
I also assumed that the criteria around it would be obviously quite, well, stringent.
Yeah, and I think it did used to be, but now 9 in 10 cars under the Motability Scheme have no modifications whatsoever. I think that's a slightly alarming statistic. The number of people that are using Motability has increased, I think it's tripled since before the pandemic. The total number of people receiving enhanced mobility PIP, which is the benefit you can use for Motability, although you don't have to, has doubled since before the pandemic. And you just have to take a look at the conditions that, as I said, have seen the biggest increases. The number of people receiving enhanced mobility PIP, i.e. eligible for Motability with sleep apnea, has increased 5-fold. The number for drug misuse has increased, I think, 8-fold. The number of people for anxiety and depression has increased 5-fold. Whereas, as I said, the very serious conditions I think people absolutely genuinely sympathise with and believe that people should receive Motability vehicles for, they've seen much, much smaller increases. So it's clear that people have broadly cottoned on to the fact that if they play the system, if they know how to answer the right questions and in what order, they can get access to a free taxpayer-funded car. Wow. And unsurprisingly, they're doing exactly that.
I mean, do we know, Elliot, what percentage, if you like, of the 589,000 people should not be claiming?
Well, it's difficult to measure that. I think the way that we need to measure, and the way that we're looking at the Taxpayers Alliance, is you take the conditions which, bluntly can't be faked. So, very serious disabling conditions that can't be faked. You take a look at the natural increase in those conditions, and most of them are seeing a natural increase. And then you look at that increase. So let's say maybe it's increased by 20%, 30%, 40%, and then you take a condition that can be faked, or at the very least can be exaggerated, like anxiety and depression, and you see a increase of 500%, and you can assume that all conditions should be increasing at roughly the same amount. And I think you can look at it that way. So that's one way that we're going to be looking at over the coming weeks and months. Clearly, there has been a natural increase in the number of people that should be eligible for this. We are getting sicker as a society, we are getting older, and we're increasing in number as a society. But some of those conditions where we're seeing these shocking spikes, these almost hockey stick spikes, they're the ones where I think we need to be clamping down on.
Are the government listening to this? Are they aware? Is the DWP, Liz Kendall and others, are they au fait across this one?
Well, they seem to be when they brought in proposed the reforms that were discussed and debated on last week. The problem is Labour MPs, their backbenchers, have their heads in the sand. They don't think any of this is a problem, and so as a result, they force the government to back down. So I think many in government are aware in principle, and maybe even know some of the detail, but unfortunately, they don't have either the political will or the political power to do anything about it.
Listen, great to have you on with us as ever, Elliot. Thank you. Interesting one, this. That is Elliot Keck, by the way. He is head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you to him.